You are listening to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM. I am delighted that you have joined us today. And I'm also delighted to bring back a guest we had fairly recently, but we had a whole bunch more stuff going on that we wanted to talk about. So, back in the Zoom booth with me today on Act 3 is Coco Madari. She is a life coach in
They are a life
Nanaimo. Sorry,
coach.
they are a life coach. We had this issue the last time we were together. Before we even started, I said they. I knew it was they. You know, that's the hard, and let's break it out. Let's start right from there. That's the hardest part about wanting to be respectful and open is that I think as humanity, we've gotten so used to just having he and she. There's never been, until the last few years, a real insurgence of understanding non-binary. Would you mind if we started with that for today's
Yeah.
conversation?
And I also want to say that he and she is also a cultural thing, right? Like this is kind of, we say this is what it's always been, but actually there's been, cultures that have had multiple genders forever. It just kind of like, shows how our brains are like so wired to think about things from such a Eurocentric like perspective.
So
And
true.
yeah. But yes, in the current kind of colonial white supremacy world we live in, yes, it's been a lot of he, she roles, play into your role, and yeah.
Absolutely. And I do understand with First Nations communities as well, Coco, that's been less of it's not been part of their culture at all. It's always been a spiritual conversation between men and women, and uh and I don't want to say trans because I don't think trans was actually the
Yeah,
word that
I
was
think like
used
two
in
spirit, I think it
that's
depends on like the
it's more two
actual
spirit, exactly.
bandwidth.
um
I can't really speak to it that much, but
no, and I don't expect that we will. But I think it's okay that we're starting the show off by getting it right the first time, right? And
yeah.
understanding that there's a lot of people that identify as they. And I was watching a show recently, Coco, and on the program itself, it sort of talked about how our the way that English has been devised, the way that our language has been devised, right? That we've as for the last 200 or 300 years, we've really sort of stuck to the subject and verb agreement. And so when we go with they, we lose the subject and the verb agreement in the conversation itself, assuming that there's more than one, which in all fairness, there is, right? There's two spirit. So how do we how do like what has been your experience, let's put it that way, in trying to help destigmatize this, help it make it more normal for people to be more comfortable in this kind of ambiguous conversation?
Yeah, I think practice makes perfect, and
Yeah.
exposure therapy, right? Just being around it, and also allowing your emotions to come up. Like I remember when I still identified as she, I had a friend who identified as they them, and there were times where I felt frustrated. Like, why do I have to like do all of this work to blah 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 blah? And I think a lot of people have that thought, but then kind of judge themselves for having that response. And, I think it's more something to be like curious about rather
Oh,
than
for
being
sure.
like, oh, I need to like fight this like human frustration that I'm having, or this makes me a bad person, or this like whatever. And just being like, obviously, um, we're talking about change going into uncharted territory. Things are going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's okay to be uncomfortable in the discomfort, right? I think that that's how
Exactly.
change eventually happens. There's a concept called the theory of change, and it's about finding out truly what is the mission, what is the end result, as opposed to, having ideas that are sort of forced upon people, and for them to automatically accept something just because that's the way that they've always done it, right? And the
Yeah.
theory of change sort of is that discussion of, wait a minute now, how can we look at this in a much broader picture, be more curious, and sort of dig things a little bit deeper? My question for you is, what made you decide to go from she to they? Was it something that you'd always known as a child? Was it
Yeah.
something that, came later? Like, how did
That's a
how did that
fantastic
transition
question.
happen?
Um, Very good question. So I think it was from, again, exposure.
Hmm.
I already identified as queer, so I had this one friend who is very dear to my heart, who runs the Trans Haven in Vancouver. I think this was one of their first like events.
Yeah.
Um, and they also do poetry workshops or something like that, where at the beginning of the workshop you get to choose what your pronoun is, and you can have it just for that hour. And that blew my mind, where you could be like, oh, I could just literally try this for an hour, and
Wow.
yeah, and just see how it feels. And so I decided to go as they them for that party. And then the next day I was like, okay, well, do I still want to go as they them? And it still felt good, and it still felt right. And then I just like kept making that decision over and over again. And then it just started to feel more natural and more obvious.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Just kind of like internally just asking myself, asking my body, like, how does this feel to me to like identify this way, or does it feel right for me to identify this way? And
And
yeah,
how, in curiosity, I have trans people in my family that I adore. And I know that for them, when I particularly would say this person was formerly a him and has become a her.
yeah,
And I know that whenever I say, because I've known this person for pretty much forever, right? Um, and the initial stages, like, although family is coming together and we are clearly watching our pronouns and making sure that we are not insulting, but in fact supporting, I also find that there's a consistent behavior that this person has that reminds us all the time. Like, if you make a mistake, we know that that mistake has been made. I'm curious about your experience with that with your own family. I know in my family, there have been moments where we just are like, oh, we're trying our best, right? We're feeling bad about it, and we don't want to feel bad about it either, right? But we want to, I mean, because that's not what support looks like in any level, right? So,
yeah,
how can we, in your experience, how has that happened for you as you've taken this journey?
yeah. Well, first of all, I don't talk to my family.
Okay.
Um, if I were to tell my father that my pronouns were they them, he would call me she to make a point, and
That would be the end of that.
and
Yeah.
we were talking about, yeah, me having a lot of experience with narcissistic personalities.
Yes.
So yeah. But yeah, so actually, when I this is a good thing to talk about. When I first started to lean into that, I started dressing more masculine because that felt really good to me, and it also felt like something in me was awakening, that was like
Yeah.
dormant.
Sure.
Like, I didn't think that I was non-binary growing up because I didn't think that was an option. However, I felt masculinity in me, and I felt queerness in me, but it was so like down, and I'm like just starting to like really embrace that queerness. And Um,
Can we actually, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but for
yeah,
the for our listeners to be clear, there's a lot of different letters that go in LGBTQ to spirit, right? The queer part, I don't really understand. I
oh,
understand other areas of it, but I don't understand that. Could you
yeah.
share with me that?
Queer for me, queer just means not straight.
Not straight, period.
It just means
Okay.
not straight. I don't know where on the spectrum I fall under any
Mhm.
like circumstances. I identify more as pansexual than anything else, like
Mhm.
just attracted to the person versus their gender, but I'm attracted to males, females, anything in between, depending on
Gotcha.
whatever. But queer just means kind of like I like to think of like queerness not only in terms of like who I'm attracted to, but also like the way that I express my sexuality. Like I'm very weird. I'm like queer. I'm just like
That makes sense to me. I mean the obvious dictionary description is exactly that. And so when I
yeah,
look at it that way, that makes perfect sense to me, right? I
yeah.
just wanted to make sure. I think that, again, and we talked about this since the last time we were together, is that I don't mind being uncomfortable in these questions because I know that a lot of our listeners are uncomfortable asking them. I will take the bullet and ask all of these questions, right? Because I know that a lot of people don't really get it, like they don't know, and I'm certainly one of them. This is not my expertise. I do my best. I swear to God, I do my best to be very, very respectful, but I will make mistakes, and I do make mistakes every day. And so even with my family, I know that I want them to feel good in their skin, right? That's what I want. I want them to feel good. And I want to feel good when I'm talking to them, that I'm respecting them for where they are in their world, right? And so I appreciate, Coco, you sharing your insight with us. On today's program of Act Three, we've kind of decided, Coco and I, that we want to talk about change. And this is one of those things that fits in with that. As a life coach, I know that change, you must accept it, because change happens no matter whether whatever you're
I'm gonna
doing. It happens
slap you
moment
in the
by
face.
moment, second by second, day by day. But what have you found in your experience to be the hardest part about dealing with change?
Um, I think the hardest part for me, I've dealt with a lot of change over the past year,
Yeah.
a lot of change. Um, in 2021, um, I made multiple six figures in my coaching business and like really became and saw myself as like a leader in the coaching industry in the bubble that I was in and felt like the rock star and like all that stuff. And things started to change and I resisted that change because I was holding on to that identity that I had. Where
Yes.
now, you know, just found out that I like got accepted to DJ in California in April and I'm like following all of these other things. I'm seeing how all of those changes has led to all of these like my life opening up in this crazy way that I would never even have imagined. Like beginning of the year, I didn't think that I was going to be like DJing in California this year. Like that's
Of
just
course, right? What a great way to start. Great way to
I
start the
know.
year.
I had no idea that that was going to be the path at all,
Yeah.
right? But so I think the hardest part and the thing that created the most resistance and the most suffering was holding on to an identity
Yeah.
or trying to resist having an identity. Like
Yeah.
like holding on to the identity of being successful and then resisting the identity of being like a failure or whatever. Right? So yeah, that was the hardest thing and the thing that I am like learning to actually release where it's like all of these identities can like come and go. There's like this fluidness versus it being like, oh, I need to like fight being this. And one thing that I ask myself when I'm like feeling an emotion or resisting an emotion, noticing I'm resisting it, is I ask myself, like, what am I making this mean about me? This fear. What am I making this fear mean about me? And then what comes up is like, I'm weak. So it's like, okay, so I'm resisting that identity of being weak.
Right.
How much energy am I putting towards resisting that identity? Because the thing that we do is we resist these identities because we think that they're going to mean that we are not going to get love, right?
Yeah. The bottom line of being loved. Am I worthy? Am I seen? What does this
Exactly.
really mean? What is the story? that I tell myself.
Yeah, and it all goes back to childhood, and it all, is
Totally.
related to the collective experience and all that stuff. But yeah, so that now I feel so much more able to embrace change now that I'm not like trying to build this identity and trying to,
Hmm.
fight this other thing, because I'm in such a more open place where I'm like, I'm coaching people, I'm also freelancing, I'm also DJing, I'm an artist. Like there's so many things that are just open. Whereas like I don't know what my schedule's gonna look like next week. I don't know what my schedule was gonna look like at the beginning of this week, and then it ended up being like crazy, just packed with so much richness because
Absolutely.
I was in that space of just being open, and that's so uncomfortable.
But you know what? But there's something to be said for that. Like when you're open to the universe, when you're open and you have removed the blockages. I know that in Buddhism, there's a big conversation about letting yourself be unattached to things. When we attach, right, that's when things start to become complicated. And and part of change is the identity. What is the story I'm telling myself, right? What is it that I'm really afraid of as I fear this change, and how can I step forward out of the change in a way that not only supports what my long-term goals are, but it also, it's so much more freeing to let go, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with letting go. Have you ever had that concern? And what does that look like?
um well, what I've been working a lot on is my relationship with money. And one thing I realized today or this morning, I'm about to do this challenge, this like 12K and 12 days challenge. I'm stepping into it. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to step into it with a different mindset, because I've made 12K in 12 days. I've made 12K in one day and, 30K in one day. Awesome.
We need
But
to
it's
be
like,
good friends if you can make 12 grand in a day. Like I'm all over that. Like we need to be much better friends than we are right now. We need to teach me how to do that. Like, and I'm sure that our listeners are thinking the same.
oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
12K in 12 days.
It
I like it.
all it all relates to your relationship with money. Anyways, so I have done that, but it was through selling coaching. So in my mind was saying I can only make that amount of money if I'm selling coaching. So there was that attachment there. And that was
Hmm.
that was blocking me, because then it's like your relationship with money is like a relationship with an actual person.
Hmm.
So if I'm saying like I can only have you if I'm doing this thing, right? It's almost like a relationship where you're like trying to change yourself in order for that
Hmm.
person to like you.
That's a little dysfunctional, isn't it?
Very dysfunctional.
Just saying.
I
Yeah.
know, right? Yeah, I know. I have so much to work on in my relationship with money, which I'm excited about, because that means there's so much money to make.
Well, I do know that the universe will give you whatever you need and they'll give it to you on time,
Mm-hmm.
providing you're open to
You
it.
have to let it in, yeah.
You have to let it in. And I mean, this sounds really silly, but I remember a time when a lot of people would not pick up a penny. And I always said to them, if the universe drops you a penny and you don't pick it up, you're saying that you're not willing to pick up anything else either. Right? Like that simple gesture that the universe is offering you, a nickel or a dime or a penny, is actually could be a lottery ticket tomorrow. Today, it's a nickel or a dime or a penny. Right?
Totally.
So there's something to be said about having a relationship that is mutual. I receive not only this feeling, I am abundant in all that I feel. But that's not easy when people are stressed out. That's not, it's very pie in the sky and umbrella theory. It's great when we are not attached to the worry. But if you're suddenly attached to it, all of that subconscious crap
Mm-hmm.
finds a way to destroy what you're saying to yourself. And then that, I think, might be a part of that
Totally.
disengagement with getting what you need or want.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. So um that's one thing that I was like this morning trying to like challenge myself to separate from and to let go. Where it's like, oh, I can make multiple six figures, I can make $1 million if I have a coaching business.
Yeah.
But what if I don't want to coach people and I want to just focus on music? How can I do it then? So then that creates a whole other thing that I have to open up to, where it's like, it could literally be anything. Money can come in
Yeah.
all different ways, and that is uncomfortable.
So this morning when you had that thought,
Yeah.
what did you tell yourself to change the pattern?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, well, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and there are lots of different tools and lots of different ways, and so my brain works quite quickly in this way. But so the first part is just noticing. I think this is just,
Yeah.
regardless of whatever tools you have, is just being open to your thoughts. And that can be challenging because we then judge our thoughts or we judge our emotions or whatever. So just opening yourself up to that. And noticing the discomfort in that new way of thinking. And I know for me, I want to be an artist that is free to be my like weird creative self. And I don't want to be hindered by money, and I don't want to depend on people paying me for coaching in order for me to do other things that I want to do. I want to coach because I want to help people. And so just starting by noticing, and then noticing that discomfort and stepping into that new thing. And that discomfort feels familiar. It feels like, oh, I'm growing. And then I ask myself, is this something that I want to challenge myself with?
Mhm.
Like, I want to challenge myself to call in money and bring in money without it being attached to one certain thing. And then once I started to open up to that, then I started to notice me wanting to coach from such a different place. Like, it was coming from, I just like want to share the wealth. I want to like help people. I want to like um help diminish or lower suffering in the world. It becomes a totally different relationship with it. So that started to feel good. And so just like noticing as you're taking those steps, just like with the pronouns, right? Being like
Yeah.
one day at a time, where it's like, I'm going to try this on. How does it feel? Okay, that feels good. It feels a bit uncomfortable, but do I want to step into this challenge? Yes, no, okay. And also honoring that yes or that no, honoring yourself and your own boundaries, because sometimes the answer is no. Like, I don't want to work on this right now, or I don't want to, whatever.
Yeah, I think that you pointed something out that it's really, really requires, I think, an extra underline, and that's about the boundaries that you feel for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's okay to try something on and change your mind. It's
Yeah.
okay to be frightened to try something on and give it a go anyway, and then decide after a reasonable period of time, and only each person can dictate what that is for them,
Yeah.
to be able to set that boundary comfortably and say, un momento, por favor, I am not sure what this feels like for me right now. And I'll explore it a little bit further and change your mind and go
Mm-hmm.
on a different path, right?
Totally, totally.
And it's
And
what I'm so inspired about, Coco, is that you've done that at what appears to be. I know that in all fairness, our radio listeners can't see the youthfulness that is in you. I get the glory of doing that, as will our YouTube listeners on Act Three. But you know, you've taken this on at a relatively youthful age, respectfully. And I'm curious, you know, did you come from a very strict, stringent background and escape from that in order to be free, or had you come from a more progressive, like how did you become you in this process of asking the questions, right? A lot of people are not self-aware. It's clear that you are self-aware. So how did that happen?
yeah, definitely was an escape. 100%, 100% escape. Um, yeah, and this isn't to like bash anyone, but
Of course not. It's not meant to.
no. Um, but what happened was a really, really terrible relationship where my body started to actually like break down. I started getting like chronic UTIs and yeast infections and just like chronic anxiety and tenseness and whatever it is. And that kind of came to a head, and my partner at the time gave me this ultimatum where I had to like change something about myself, or else he's going to break up with me, which he had done multiple times, which I had very much, done, and almost like made me want him more, was when it was like that really toxic whatever. It's like, oh no, I
Yeah.
have to prove something, and now I'm like, now my trauma response is activated, and now I'm like, oh, I want to get their approval, right? And I think he knew that. So we played this game, and because I think otherwise I wouldn't have been with him, and I think he knew that.
Yeah.
And so then it was just one step too far, and then something just clicked in me where it's just like, he's trying to break up with me. He moved here to Canada from Ireland, and I was feeling a lot of guilt about breaking up with him because he had moved here for me and he doesn't have any friends and blah, 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 blah.
The
But
stories
then,
we tell ourselves. That's the
yes,
lovely codependent side of
oh
relationships.
yes, oh
Yes,
yes.
yes. Very, very. I'm quite sure that you're not the only author of this story.
I know,
I think
right?
there's a lot of I think
It's
there's a lot of
tales
people
all
that
the
have
time.
done this in their time for sure. You bet.
Yeah, and then so a voice inside of me said like, get out now, now is the time. Like,
Yeah.
and then so I like made a big dramatic thing like, don't break up with me, and then he's like, I'm dumping you.
Of course, of course. Yeah, break it down. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
It's not me, it's you.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, and
Yeah, shift it.
something kind of just took over
Yeah,
me where it's just like
yeah,
I kind of knew what to do. I went to my friend's house, stayed over there, and then when I came to get my stuff, I brought him with me so that he would distract him while I packed and stuff, because I knew that he wasn't going to do anything while someone else was there.
yeah.
So it's just like this. It was like this genius came over me, which didn't feel like it at the time, but now I
Of
understand. It was
course.
like my like future self, or it was spirit, or it was God, or whatever it was.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, and then afterwards, I knew that he was gonna try to get me back, and I knew I had like a month. I don't know why I knew I had a month, but that's how long I thought I had. And so I immediately like went into therapy. I started like watching TED Talks. I started reading all of the breakup books, and Conscious Uncoupling was the first one I did. And there were some hiccups around that because I was like, oh, maybe we can work on this together.
Yeah, no.
So
No, 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 no. That
that didn't
doesn't
work. That didn't work.
traditionally work, Coco.
But it actually kind of did help because we had separated, and I was like gonna sponsor him for PR, and we had to like do all of that, like cancellation. So glad that I got out of that. But we had some time apart, a couple months, and then we came back because I wanted to show him these books because I bought them for him, and I was like, you can read these books and blah blah blah. And I just remember feeling in my gut, like my guts were like twisted in, and I suddenly lost my appetite when I like, and I just, because I had that space, I
Mhm.
knew I had a deeper awareness about what was actually happening the whole time we were together. And yeah, so since so I was in therapy for 6 months, and it totally changed my life. And I started doing like hula hooping and circus stuff, which I had never even thought I would ever do. I like avoided the weird people. I was like, yeah.
Wow, what an
Hmm.
explosion.
I
Yeah,
know, yeah.
how
And then I
fabulous.
found life coaching from this podcast, and then I just became completely obsessed, and that changed my life. And then I became a life coach and became an entrepreneur, which was then the real inner work.
Well, and I think that that's the
Yeah.
mistake that a lot of people have, right? Is that most people that are life coaches or counselors or therapists, 99% of the time, the good ones anyway, have already been down the road. Like they've done the work
Mm-hmm.
because there that is something that needs to be, I think, emphasized is it's a lot of work to be yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a lot of work to know who and how am I becoming and who am I now as life has changed, right? Who am I now? Because change is so prevalent, right? People lose partners in divorces and relationships all the time. People lose jobs. People have a lot of grief that goes around with any number of different things in their life, including the death of a loved one. And so, we often, I think, forget to say, well, who am I today? Who am I now? And checking in. When you talked about, you felt it in your body, the UTIs, and like all of a sudden you were sick all of the time and all of that stuff. To me, that is like the biggest red flag there is, that you're not in a good space.
Yeah.
Because if even Oprah said, if you knock on the door, right? Spirit knocks on the door gently. I love this philosophy. Spirit will knock on the door gently. I won't knock on my desk right now because I don't want to shake the video, right? But it knocks once. You don't pay attention, it'll knock a little harder. You don't pay attention, it'll knock a little harder. You don't pay attention, it'll start slamming. You don't pay attention, it's going to start hitting hard. You don't pay attention, you're going to knock the freaking door right down and off its hinges, because the body tells you what's right for you and what isn't. There's that little small inner voice that's constantly communicating with us.
Mm-hmm.
If you just tuned in, folks, you're tuned in to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM on the dial. If you are watching us on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We love sharing this content with you. If you're listening to us now on iHeartRadio or Spotify, thank you so very much for tuning in. And once again, there's one more plug. If you're watching us on TV on Shaw Cable 4, we're always glad that you tune in. So thanks so much for doing so. Listen, in the booth to me, I have Coco Madari. They are a life coach. I got it. I started and I middled it. And as difficult as the conversation is, there's more to this conversation than talking about change. It's also understanding how we can communicate with each other better. And I hope that you take that from this story today. Coco's experiences have really been quite moving. She's, changed her life, changed their life in so many ways, and is helping us in our community to kind of figure out, how can we be allies? How can we support people in our lives just a little bit better? Super glad that you're here, Coco. Thanks for your inspiration.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I wanted to point out in this, a bit of a station identification. There is a march for gender visibility happening March the 31st. One of my former guests, or one of my previous guests on the program, is leading the walk. It will be at City Hall at 1 o'clock. It goes from 1 o'clock until 2 o'clock, walking down to Mafio Sutton Park, where there'll be some, conversation and celebration. But it's the day of visibility for trans, and we hope that you will join the march with us. In my world, I also want to celebrate some big things that are happening. Big things in the sense that not only am I experiencing a lot of fantastic changes, International Women's Day is experiencing some different changes as well, in the fact that for probably the first time in my world, and I'm saying it very selfishly, in my world, I'm not celebrating it strictly as the gender that I identify with as a woman. I am now wanting to open it up and hope that our community will join this piece of it as well. Women come in all different shapes, sizes, varieties as humanity. Let's stand together on International Women's Day this year. March the 8th is when that will happen. And I'll be celebrating it this entire month. So please join me in that. Celebrate the women that are in your life that may not identify the way that they once did. So having said that, I hope that I said that properly and respectfully, but that's where I'm going with that. Coco, welcome back to the program. I think I had a lot to say there that I didn't realize I was going to say, but there you go.
No,
What else is new?
good. It gave me like a little bit of a break, and got to hear about
Gives
the march. I'm excited about. Hell yeah.
I think the march is a really great opportunity. I mean, I have no idea how many people will attend, but this is, I think, the 3rd or 4th annual march. And it's really designed to actually get people to sort of see people that have been often invisible. We don't want trans people to be invisible. We want trans people to be part of our community the same way everybody else is. So why should it be invisible? So, part of this is just the awareness piece, and for people to feel more comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And that's awkward in itself, because I don't think that anybody should have to feel more comfortable than they already are. But I'm not experiencing that, and people in our community are. And so I just want to recognize that it's not the same for everybody in community. We come to it from a different place, from a different background. And it's important that we recognize that.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah. So back to our conversation, though, I want to talk about mastering self-awareness because I think that that is something, do, 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 do. I see for our listeners, she's rocking, they are rocking their head. So let's talk about that. What is it? What has it meant to you in your journey to become more self-aware?
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I actually just had this conversation with myself the other day. It's almost like because I have been working with people to help them with their website copy and their sales page copy. And I was working with this one coach who is incredible human, and we were looking at their sales. I was reflecting on the sales page that we had written together, and it dawned on me that what she like, because it's like it was for a lifetime program, and it dawned on me that what she was asking people to do was to enter into a lifetime commitment to going back to themselves with curiosity and finding out what's there for no other reason other than just being curious.
Yes.
And that was like, oh, because I think a lot of us go in and like process our feelings and do the work or whatever because we're looking to feel better, because we're looking to get something at the end of it.
Yeah.
Right? Versus just going in because you're just curious and because you want to. And I was like, it just blew my mind.
So just to be clear, when you say just to be curious, are you saying just to go in without the pretense of having a reason behind it, like there's a curiosity there, for example, which has no reason for change necessarily, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's like exactly. It's, it's like maybe looking at a blade of grass and just wondering,
Yeah,
what's that all about? And
with
just
the
like
eyes of a child, like
that,
why?
yeah, that leaning in, that wonder, but then going into ourselves just with that wonder, going into our own emotions and feeling, oh, I'm feeling some like tenseness come up. I'm curious about what that's about versus how do I fix this? How do I change this? How do I make this go
Yeah.
away? How do I feel better? And so that's really where self-awareness starts, is that intention with which you're looking at yourself. Am I
Mm-hmm.
looking at myself to change what I'm feeling? Am I looking at myself to get something out of this? Because if you've been doing self-development for a while, you understand that you everything that you want in life comes after you feel your feelings.
That's very true.
Like,
Always comes after.
exactly. So
Yeah.
you can get into this place where you're like, oh, I'm going to feel my feelings so that I can hit this goal. I'm going to feel my feelings so I can make more money. I'm going to feel my feelings so I can have a better relationship. But when we do that, then we're coming at it from this place of uh, fighting what is and resisting what is.
Yeah.
And that just creates more resistance in the body, and that creates just whatever. So my self-awareness increases when I am not resisting what is happening, and I'm literally just interested to listen and hear more about what's going on. So, for example, like I talked about having that breakthrough this morning, um, around being attached to my coaching business as the way to make money. That came because last night I was thinking about like, oh, like I made a couple of offers, and I hadn't gotten any like consult or anything. And so I knew the ways to look into that and to kind of see where my beliefs were, blah, blah, blah. And then I noticed just being like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to look into like my client concept or my self concept or my thoughts about I don't want to do any of that stuff.
Right.
And that was the awareness that kind of peaked it, where I was like, well, I actually think I need to do that because that's the way I think I'm going to make money, is through the coaching business. And that kind of opened that up. So just but if I was coming from a place of resistance, then I would have been like, no, we're still going to be working on this thing, right? Because that's what we think we need to do. But because there was like a little bit of crack of openness of like, oh, I wonder what that's about, then I was able to like have that breakthrough that I had this morning, and then kind of shift my attention to something that is more helpful for me and for my future.
Yeah, I love the shifting of intention piece,
Yeah.
because I think that's true. It does open things up very differently. When people come to you, Coco, what are some of the things that are getting in their way? What are some of the pieces where life coaching can really
Yeah.
support people where they're at?
I think the biggest thing is that first came to my mind is self-judgment.
Yeah.
People typically want to work with me because they see just how kind of unapologetic and like
Hmm.
weird and authentic I am.
Hmm.
And they're like, ooh, I'm noticing within myself that like holding myself back. And then we start to get into it, and it's some sort of self-judgment that typically stems from a place of like there's something wrong with me.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us have it, especially those who do not fit in the typical white heterosexual male box. But even white males also have it. But yeah, it's like people normally come to me because there's some sort of a blockage, and they often want to come to me because they want to like get rid of it, right? But then we have to go back to that like curiosity and just being interested
Yes.
in yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get
I'm
here
just
in the
gonna be
first place?
interested in myself and invest in myself because I just want to. Not
Yes.
because I think I need to fix myself or because I need to, but because I'm actually just genuinely interested in myself. And I think a lot of people do have shame around that too, where it's like, oh, I can't be
Well, they
interested
do,
in
because a lot of
myself.
people have the belief system that if they are into themselves in that way, then that in itself is narcissism, which it's not. There's a
Exactly.
difference between
Huge difference.
being curious about yourself so that you can live a better life, or being selfish or self-aware, right? And even selfishness, right? Such a negative connotation that goes with being selfish. But
Mm-hmm.
being selfish is actually not necessarily a bad word. If you've come from, any kind of dysfunction and you're looking after your own best interest, that can be conceived as being selfish, but it's the furthest thing from the truth, right?
Totally.
People need to be caring for themselves in a way without those action-packed words that are so
Totally.
harming, I think, to the overall self-esteem.
Totally. And what I would do with a client if they were like had that block around being curious of themselves because they don't want to be selfish, it's going into those emotions around being selfish and
Yes.
actually feeling that pain, and like there are ways for you to like feel into it without it feeling completely overwhelming. And when you have someone like a coach to help you walk through it, it feels a lot less scary because these emotions can be really like
They're
intense.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, they really
So
can.
yeah, so just like really getting to know that those emotions around feeling selfish, and then embracing them and finding and identifying that self-love that's already there, that's already healing all of the stuff that's inside of you. And that's where that kind of like transformation can happen, and that integration. Because like I
Hmm.
was saying, it's when we're resisting an identity that we run into problems, because we're humans. We're like all about duality. We are both and all the time. But at the end of the day, we are all love.
Yeah, our purest form for sure. And
That
you
is
know,
just our
and
full form. We are all love, regardless of whatever identity
yeah,
comes and goes. And that's what I've been really working on, is really not attaching to any identity. Like when I got that DJ acceptance thing, I immediately I wanted to identify with being a successful DJ and blah blah blah, and then I started to feel attached, right? And it was like, no, that can come and go. That the opportunities will come and go, and they'll change, and they'll do whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm love. That's all.
Yeah, you're not your job,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not your job. You're not your title, whether it's wife, mother, child, boss, right? Like we're not our titles ever. And separating from that, right, is a very difficult thing for most people to do, especially I think for women, more so than men, but I'm sure that men feel this way as well, especially, I've spent a lot of my life working with older adults. There have been many situations where older men, particularly when they've left their job, they are completely lost. They don't know who they are anymore. And they're very clear about it, right? And there's, thankfully there are things like med sheds and things like that that are coming that sort of will support men being themselves in their arena. Women, I think, are a little bit more, how do you say, self-aware and just in that, right? Like we know, I was watching Jane Fonda this morning and she said, women and men are different. Women, when they need something, they will go to each other, they will look them in the eye and they will say, hey, I need your help. Men will very often never do that. They will turn inward and shy away from it. They won't reach out to their friendships. Occasionally they do. This is not meant to be a blanket that all men, no, there's no totalities here, right? But the larger share of men are very tied up in who they are by their job. And when then that's gone, they often have a difficult time. I'm not a man. It's not fair for me to speak that way, but I do notice that that is a common thread, common
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Whereas
Yeah.
women, even though we may have a title or two or five or 20, we tend to be able to reach out to get the support that we need when things are not working right. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, I think it definitely depends on the person for sure as well. Like, some people have more of the tendency to like when things are going badly or whatever, they'll go into helping others
Yes, very much so.
and still completely ignore what is really happening inside.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. There's a denial piece and it's better to just pick up. My mom was like that, bless her heart. She's gone now. She's been gone for 20 odd years, but very much so. She just like, I'm not looking at this. Done. Done. I can't go down that road. And I think for a lot of people, it's very painful to do that self-awareness thing. What would you recommend that people do as a start? Besides being curious, we've talked a lot about being curious. But for those people that are still not really sure about what that might look like, is there any thoughts that you have in regards to just like getting people started in that journey?
For sure. I would start by noticing when you are having a feeling,
Yeah.
probably an uncomfortable one or even a positive one, and then your brain tries to interfere and says and makes it mean something. Like, oh, what's wrong with you? Like, why
Yes.
can't you be like all these other people who aren't feeling anxious right now, as if you know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Or like you're being weird, you're being embarrassing, and just notice when you're having a judgment around what you're feeling. Just
Yes.
start there, and you don't even have to do like anything else. Just start by that noticing, and then through that you'll start to get some breakthroughs that are specific to you.
So now when you started this road for your own self-discovery, did you find that you did a lot of dreaming in and during and around change as it was happening to you? Like, did you find that you were being guided by spirit through dream or feeling, or how did you know you were on the right path?
Well, I didn't know I was on the right
Yeah, that's a great answer. Most of us don't. Yeah, for
path.
sure. Right? I don't know.
um
Yeah.
Now it feels more like I feel it more like I know. Um And I'm more aware now of like when I'm taking action based on fear versus when I'm taking action based on love. Something that I've been thinking about is, in this action, am I looking to express something or am I looking to get something? Am I looking to get approval? Am I looking to get whatever it is? And so
Yes.
that's something that I've been really, really working on, because I think all of us do have this, you know, intuition and this kind of solid knowing of like, this is what I'm doing. Like with my cats, for example, if my cats were ever like in any danger, there would be like no question. It would be like, okay, this, you know, we're gonna
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
get them out of the situation, whatever.
Yeah.
It's that
Exactly.
certainty. Like, we all have that inside of ourselves. I think the problem is we're not taking action from that place. We're taking action from fear, taking action from trying to figure it out, or taking action from our brains, which gets us into these like not great situations. And then we start doubting ourselves, start doubting our intuition. We're like, okay, well, do I
Absolutely.
make the right decisions?
Yeah.
But it's when you start to take more of those actions from that place, and that certainty only comes when you really feel your feelings, right? Because fear is, we're afraid of what will happen that will make us feel a certain way.
Yeah.
But if you go right ahead and embrace that feeling that you're afraid of, then suddenly you're coming at it from this like fuller, more loving, more integrated place. And then you're the way that your brain works differently. Like your thoughts slow down, you feel clear, you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this. Oh, I want to eat this today. Oh, I, um, whatever.
You know, when you were talking about slowing down, something else came in. It's not entirely related. To be honest with you, I'm a little bit off topic and I know it. But there's something that I really valued that I'd heard this morning. Again, I was on Facebook or one of the recordings, and it was a gentleman who was talking about Hokuminum language and First Nation culture. And they talked about how English people, right? And I'm going to say, I'm saying Caucasians, let's word it that way, is probably more clear. When we're talking, we're always, we talk very, very quickly. We're always trying to, there's an agenda. We're either, like you said, we're trying to get something, or we're trying to, defend something, or we're trying to get our point across, or what have you. But it's this constant momentum. And I'm guilty of it. I know I am, of talking and talking and talking. Whereas in Hokuminum and in First Nation culture, rather, it's a much slower process. And each and every word has impact and meaning. And by slowing everything down, we're actually honoring not only our elders, but the people that we are with, that speed for which we're so used to and we're so driven to do is actually lost on the culture, because it's disposable. It doesn't have the same intention or meaning behind slowing things down. And so in some of what you've been saying today, you're kind of reminding me that, we're being curious, we're slowing down. Is this self-judgment? Are we being curious? Are we able to identify in one way or another way, and kind of wearing the jacket of that for an hour to start with and see if it resonates? And then, if it does, terrific. And if it doesn't, move along and try something else to see if it resonates, right? Sort of to notice, the most important thing, noticing without judgment. And I'm honored by hearing that this morning prior to us being together today, Coco, because I think you're saying the same thing in a way, not necessarily language based, but slowing down and feeling it and being okay with whether it's a good feeling or a bad feeling, because there is no good or bad. It's just a feeling. It's just there. Is
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
does
totally.
that make sense?
And the image that I got when you were talking was like a baby who was taking steps. It's like we're
Yes.
going, because we're opening up to this totally uncharted territory of the world. And so it makes sense that we're moving in this way, that it's just like one step at a time.
Yeah.
And we're all moving in different directions, because we're all stars that are all moving in all sort of directions in the universe.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
my path is different from your path is different from whatever. So we actually are just doing that. We're taking that step, seeing how it feels, taking that other step, seeing how it feels.
And so the good news about this conversation, I think, is that we're giving people permission, permission to be curious. It's good to be curious. It's okay to have doubts and to be uncomfortable. And change is a process. It happens gradually, right? And not to be afraid of it. There was something else that you said earlier that really resonated with me as well, was that fear base. What am I afraid of, and who am I as a result of that?
And
Right?
that impatience too, because I notice that within myself a lot,
Mhm.
is impatience is also coming from fear, where it's like, if this doesn't happen right now, then what?
Yes.
Right?
It's
And that,
if and when and then. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we could
Very,
go,
very
we could just
clean.
skip that part where we skip the part where we push ourselves to do the thing, and that causes so much strain on your nervous system. It takes away so much energy. It probably won't get you the result you want. You'll be burnt out. If we could just skip that part and go to the part of like, what am I actually afraid of? Then boom, you just saved a whole day, maybe a whole week of your life, right?
And the challenge is, right, doing that. The challenge is
Sure, because it doesn't
getting the
feel good to
monkey
feel
brain
bad.
to stop being a monkey brain, and let
Yeah,
it just, right, the
yeah,
story we tell ourselves, the identity we give ourselves, all of this stuff, really at the end of the day, if it isn't serving in love, it might be something we want to revisit as being, is this worth it? Is this really a good way to go? We're at the end of the show. I can't believe it. I
yeah.
can't believe it. I'm just like, what? I looked at the time and went, you got to be kidding me. We're not there. How is that possible? So I'm going to do a last station identification here really quick and just remind everybody that you have been listening to CHOY 101.7 FM. It's Act 3. My name is Kathy Holmes. I am more than delighted every week to be with you, and I'm so grateful that you tune in all the time. So please keep doing that. Make sure you adjust your dial, put it in your calendar if it's not already. We've always got great guests. So thank you so much for tuning in every Monday at 1 o'clock. I also want to thank Coco Madari. Did I get it right this time?
Coco Madari, like
Coco
ah,
Madari.
yeah.
They are an incredible guest who has given us a little bit of something to think about. We're going to talk about what the last piece of wisdom is coming up next. Where are we? If you're going to imbibe something on our community, it's my favorite part. What would be the takeaway? What would you want people to know?
I just want to call on something that you said that really resonated with me that I am going to sit with. That was like I thought was really helpful. Was you're not your job,
Yeah.
because that's something that I've prided myself on all my different jobs and things. But at the end of the day, you are not that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a big breakthrough for me. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I love it when it goes both ways. It makes me happy too. Yahoo, yahoo.
I
Well,
love to be
everybody.
coached too. That's
Well, thank you, Coco. Thank you so much for your time. I love it when you're on the program. I look forward to hosting you again, coming up on another show somewhere down the line. In the meanwhile, have a really fabulous time in California, you lucky girl.
lucky person.
Lucky person. Sorry, lucky person. I was so close, so close. All right, everybody. With that, I'm going to say good day. Have yourself a wonderful afternoon, ladies and gents. Please make sure that you tune in next week on Act 3. And don't forget, let's look after each other on International Women's Day. Take good care of you and have a wonderful day. Bye for now.